Heading into last season, we thought the Panthers safety room was going to be one of the strengths of the roster. Instead, it turned out to be one of the biggest disappointments in 2024. Can the room take a step forward in 2025? And is there a missing piece? We'll break down the Panthers safety room right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as we are back in season mode beginning next Monday. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. No, the mailbag is not back just yet, but you can always hit me up in my DMs or just at me with any questions you have about your Panthers as we are closing in the days to training camp ahead of the 2025 season, and I cannot wait. One more position group to take a look at when evaluating the Carolina Panthers defense heading into 2025. Last but certainly not least, although the safety room was not great last year, which was a pretty big disappointment considering how we felt with Jordan Fuller and Nick Scott coming over, plus Xavier Woods in there, 3 starting safeties as Jerry Rivera, the Panthers defensive coordinator, saw it, that it would be one of the strengths of the roster. Matter of fact, go back to last year's show, listen to it, and you'll listen to me, this idiot, saying that same thing, that was going to be one of the strengths of the roster, and that was not the case, which makes the signing of Tre'von Moehrig over from the Raiders this offseason possibly the biggest signing of the offseason for the Panthers defensively among many offseason signings. And I know I've already said that Bobby Brown III coming over from LA, the Rams, to be a starter at defensive tackle alongside Derek Brown coming off of an injury. If Derek can get back to his Pro Bowl status, having Bobby Brown there with him to help stop the run, that could be massive for this defense because your defense is only as good as they are up the middle. And by up the middle, I mean at defensive tackle. If your defensive tackle stink like they did last year, no offense to all the guys who played, but they weren't up to standard, and the defense gave up 3,000 plus rushing yards and was the worst scoring defense in the history of not just this franchise, but the National Football League. So adding Bobby Brown III, I think, is a big signing because of just how important I value the trenches and in particular defensive lines. Like as far as when I watch college football, I have this mantra that D-lines win. In the NFL, probably the same. Go back and watch Super Bowl and see what Philadelphia and their defensive front did to the Chiefs' offensive line. And for the second time, Patrick Mahomes running for his life in a Super Bowl. So being good up front, in particular in the middle of your defensive line, is so important, but you can't be bad on the back end. And we saw from day one, week 1 on the road against New Orleans, the communication wasn't there. J.C. Horn gets beat, which isn't really true because it was Jordan Fuller who did not communicate well with JC, and a wide open Rashid Shaheed. The Saints scored a touchdown, and that was one of many scores they had that day as Panthers defense did not get off the field at all that Sunday, the start of the season down in New Orleans. A bad Saints team, as it turned out to be later on. Derek Carr no longer even in the NFL, is retired, but they were not good in the back end. Xavier Woods was known as being a really good communicator, and we just did not see that communication throughout the season. I understand that you watch guys like Jordan Fuller miss a period of time, Nick Scott miss a lot of time as well, and that was a common theme defensively. The amount of injuries on the defensive line there at linebacker with Shaq and Josie Jewell, and then at safety, maybe aside from those other groups, maybe the most hard hit when it comes to injuries a season ago. And you looked at it heading into the year, again, like a lot of expectations about what these guys could be. Xavier Woods was borderline a top 10 safety in 2023, was ranked 12th among safeties that qualified by Pro Football Focus, and that Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, both of those guys are coming over from LA, the Rams, and the Bengals respectively with experience in the scheme. Now, Scott was not good with the Bengals. He was actually benched midway through that season after 10 games, and he was coming over after being the lowest graded qualifying safety in the NFL in 2023. But the hope was, being in a familiar scheme, being a backup for Jero Rivera, that he would play better. That was not the case, and these guys did not live up to expectations at all. Xavier dropped back to the 77th best safety in the NFL, according to PFF, had a 57.0 grade, which is not who I think Xavier Woods is. Jordan Fuller, he had a 53.8 grade. That was 82nd among safeties after he was 48th the year prior. Nick Scott had a 52.6, which actually was better than what he did in 2023 when he was, again, the worst safety in the NFL, according to PFF. That was good for 86. So all three of those guys did not play up to the standard that you would have thought. And at the very least, had Woods played the way he had played prior in Carolina, and then Fuller would have given Carolina a full season, and then when he would have played been better, then maybe the safety group isn't in a situation now where they've moved on from they moved on from two of those guys, as Woods is now in Tennessee, Fuller is now down I-85 in Atlanta, and Scott's back, but he's only back here to be a special teams guy, and we'll see if he even makes the roster because he's a vested veteran. Do they want to guarantee a salary for this season? I'm guessing not, if a better option arises over the next couple of weeks once training camp and the preseason gets underway. And tackling, too, was such a massive issue. Again, 3,000 rushing yards. That's primarily on the front seven, not being able to get those stops and be able to get TFL's tackles for loss. But the secondary did not do a good job cleaning anything up at all. Xavier Woods had a 10.8 missed tackle percentage, which actually, looking at the linebackers from last season, and the linebackers are on the team this year, we talked about those guys on Monday, not that bad. Jordan Fuller, 10.9, also not that bad. But Nick Scott, atrocious, 21.2% missed tackle percentage. And I just think back to right before the half against Cincinnati, the Bengals decide we're going to risk it because we have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and throws the ball to Jamar Chase in the flat. You got to be able to make those open field tackles. I get it. He's a better player than you, but you played with them last year. So it's not like the first time you've seen those moves, and he could have get him on the ground. Touchdown Cincinnati, could have changed the entire tide of that game. Had the Panthers had scored a touchdown to begin the game in week 4, had they not had the drops by Leggett in that game, and also had Nick Scott just made a routine play, which he didn't, which led Carolina to sign Tre'von Moehrig to a 3-year deal worth $51 million and up to $60 million in incentives this offseason, because he can do a lot of the things that these guys struggled to do last year. He started 64 games across his 4 years with the Raiders after being drafted on day 2 of the draft out of Texas Christian. 104 tackles last season, 5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions. He has 6 career interceptions, and his passer rating allowed throughout his career is a 99.1. Looking at his PFF grade from a year ago, 67.5. That's 35th out of 38 safeties, much better than the guys who played for Carolina last year. Pass rush grade of a 70.1. So nice to hear that. That was 8th among 24 safeties. So interested to see how Jero Rivera may utilize him as a blitzer as he's played close to the box over the last couple of years. Run defense grade, this is what you really want to see. 87.5, 6 out of 93. All of those guys struggled against the run. Coverage grade, this would be the one thing that will concern you. 54.4, not good enough. That was 72nd out of 96 safeties. Again, he's played more of a box safety. I would guess that's what they're asking him to do in this scheme this season and moving forward. So they're going to have to find somebody to be more of a coverage safety behind him or next to him in the secondary. But missed tackle percentage, 7.4 compared to 10.8 for Woods, 10.9 for Fuller, and 21.2 gross from Nick Scott last season. And really what Carolina needed after the struggles that they had communication-wise and just tackling-wise in this secondary at safety last year is they needed a tone setter. And that's exactly what Tre'von Moehrig brings to Carolina, a different kind of attitude, and an attitude of a dog that Dan Morgan was talking about when they decided, when he was promoted down the hallway a year and a half ago to be the Carolina Panthers general manager and president of football operations. So that's what they're getting in Tre'von Moehrig, and I'm excited to see what he's able to provide here. But I'm also wondering who's going to be back there with him? Demani Richardson, nice story as a UDFA last year. Lathan Ransom coming over from the Ohio State University, but are either one of those guys the best option for the Panthers as another starting safety? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. One of the better stories on the season last year for the Panthers, especially on what was just a porous defense with all the injuries, the questions about the scheme and the defensive coordinator overall, was Demani Richardson. What he was able to do as a rookie undrafted free agent from Texas A&M, played in 14 games, starting 5, including the final 3 games of last season, had a PFF grade of 60.1, which was better than all the veterans that were in that room expected to be the top guys. A starting 3, he was 66 out of 98 safeties. Coverage grade was a 58.6, of course, can be improved upon, but still a rookie, 59th out of 96. Run defense grade was a 66.9, 58 out of 93. Safeties can certainly take that. Then had a missed tackle percentage of 11.9, improve upon that. And I think that your run defense grade certainly goes up. Your overall grade goes up as well. And I do look at Demani Richardson, and I think back to that Monday during training camp where he intercepted Bryce Young, which back then didn't really seem like that bad of a thing for Bryce to get picked off, because I didn't think Bryce was going to come out and play as poorly as he did in weeks 1 and weeks 2 against Chargers and the Saints. And then later on in that practice, Jack Plummer, who I wasn't feeling really good about during that period of time and still wouldn't feel that highly about Jack Plummer, he gets intercepted by Demani Richardson. Or maybe it wasn't an interception. It was close. It was on the far end of Cedar Street, so couldn't really see whether he got his foot down or not. But Ejiro Rivera said after practice that if it's close, they're going to count it, which fine. It obviously on Sundays, it doesn't necessarily count because of that. But who the hell knows with replay nowadays? But either way, Demani Richardson had a really nice day that Monday, went on to have some pretty nice preseason games, and not surprisingly so, made the roster initially and stuck around for the entirety of the season as Fuller missed time, as Scott missed time, and just the overall standard that we felt like was going to be set there in the safety room was not met last year. And it's another example of the importance of scouting. Undrafted guy. He played at a big school at A&M in the SEC, so it's not like people were not aware of who he was and his talent level, but he went undrafted and he decided to come to Carolina. And much like Jalen Coker, he was able to make a positive impact last season. And heading into this year, while it may be a little bit more muddy as far as the waters with Coker, and if he's going to have a big role this year with Tedero McMillan being drafted 8th overall, Adam Thielen coming back for another year and getting a pay raise, which does not lead me to believe he's going to have a reduced role, because they really get the first round pick from last year, hoping to take a bigger step forward this upcoming season. And then you got Hunter Renfrow. Like, it's a pretty crowded wide receiver room. So there's questions about what Coker's role is going to be. As far as Richardson, the only question I have as far as his role is, are you sure? Are you sure that he's shown you enough to be that guy who's going to start next to Tre'von Moehrig? Or do you want to give a vet who's not here currently an opportunity to take over? Like, I think it's important to develop your guys and to just show faith in some people, because a lot of times, anytime it feels like, and it's just fans in general, like, I get it, fans short for fanatic, but you want to have the best players possible for your team. And I totally understand all of that, but there seems to be at times where people just aren't patient enough to be like, okay, yes, let's play that guy. Because I do wonder, like, had Shaq Thompson and Joseph Jewell not both battled injuries last year, where Shaq was just done for the year and Joseph would have really kind of battled him, would Trevin Wallace be seen in the light he is now? Probably not, because you got to see him play and you get to see the promise of Trevin Wallace. But would you have not been like, oh, we need another linebacker? Are we sure we can depend on this 3rd round pick? Which is different, because he was a day 2 pick, where Demani wasn't picked at all. which once you get to the 6th round, past 5th round, you're probably in a better situation as a player getting to choose where you're going to go and also getting typically more money than what would have been slotted to you in the 6th or 7th round. So maybe you're a better player by not even getting taken because it's like, okay, I can negotiate. Maybe you're telling your agent's telling teams like, don't take me. We're good. We'll go where we want to go, which should be the way things are anyways in the NFL, but we're not going to have that conversation on today's show. I just wonder, is this the best situation for Carolina to just stick with Richardson? Or should they go get somebody else? And again, got to be patient every once in a while. Maybe I'm doing what I'm accusing people of doing and not being patient enough, but I do think it's a reasonable question to ask when looking at Demani Richardson. And it's not just him. It's also Lathan Ransom, who they just drafted out of the Ohio State there on day 3 of the draft back in April up there in Green Bay. And just looking at his scouting report, toughness and tenacity are Ransom's calling cards, which makes him good use in all facets of the game. While he may lack the tools some other prospects have, he has the instincts and awareness to make up for it. And we talked to Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes back in May about Lathan Ransom and his role last year at Ohio State, and he was willing to kind of defer to Caleb Downs, the all-world safety who will be a top 10 pick next April, wherever the hell the draft's at. Going to be one of the best players in college football again this fall. But Lathan was willing to have that young guy come in, do his role, but Lathan still played at a high level and helped Ohio State win a national championship and played in all of those games. And he's had injury issues in the past. And Jay said that those should be something you should be concerned about heading into the NFL. And he's not quite sure if day one he's somebody who's going to be ready to go. And I appreciate Jay's honesty because I know a lot of people may just be homers and I want to give you their honest truth opinion about some of the players that they're covering. And certainly, I will tell you my true feelings on anything as it pertains to the Carolina Panthers. And I appreciate Jay doing that as it pertains to Ohio State Buckeyes and whatever program he's covering. But overall, Lathan was good. 13 AP All-American, playing next to, again, the best safety in college football. First team All Big Ten last year, tied the team lead with forced fumbles with 3. And that is something I think probably really made the Panthers want him because that has been a point of emphasis since Sajero got here and trying to punch the ball out, get the ball out on the ground, force more turnovers, which didn't do a great job of doing that his first year, did a better job last year. Hopefully this season they'll do more of that. Now, not getting a ton of pressure, which pressure leads to turnovers. That's probably a big reason, but knowing a guy that you drafted has a forte of doing that is a good thing. And had 76 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, sack, interception, 2 pass breakups. So he's a good player. It's just, is he with Demani ready? And Demani would be far more ready, I would think, than Lathan, but is he ready to be kind of in that big role? And if Jared's looking at this again of having 3 starting safeties, all right, Tre'von, Demani, those 2, totally sold on that being the case. If you're going to have 3 starters, I don't know if Lathan or Ransom is going to be your 3rd starting safety, which makes it pretty clear to me that adding a veteran safety should be a priority. And again, I'm recording this early. You guys are listening to this on Friday, the 11th of July. I'm recording this on Thursday, the 26th of June. So maybe something has happened, maybe not. If so, disregard. If not, keep listening, of course. But clearly to me right now, adding a veteran safety is a priority. They didn't do it in the offseason like I thought they should during OTAs, mandatory minicamp. And you get to a point in time where when they were talking to guys back in March during free agency, kind of the second wave of free agency, the first and only wave really happened on that first day of the legal negotiating period. So it was not necessarily a robust crop of free agents. Now, safety was a spot where, of course, you get Tre'von, but Javon Holland was somebody that they apparently were also interested in. There's a possibility they were going to double up and get both of those guys. And had that been the case, plus Demani Richardson, I think it's a great situation for Carolina. Of course, that's not the case as Javon is now a New York Giant and Trevon's here. And so is Demani. And there's other guys that talk to like Marcus Williams, who is a former Saint, was with Baltimore last year, who's a free agent still. And Julian Blackman, who has been with Indianapolis. He's a free agent still and could make some sense here in Carolina. You get to the draft lead up and those guys kind of want to wait to see what you do. And when they see that you take a safety in the 4th round, then maybe they wonder, oh, do I want to go there? Am I going to have more than just a year? Or is it just going to be straight up 1 year and then you're gone? Which, again, I'm recording this early. You guys are listening to this on Friday, the 11th of July. I'm recording this on Thursday, the 26th of June. So maybe something has happened, maybe not. If so, disregard. If not, keep listening, of course. But clearly, to me, right now, adding a veteran safety is a priority. They didn't do it in the offseason like I thought they should during OTAs, mandatory minicamp. And you get to a point in time where when they were talking to guys back in March during free agency, kind of the second wave of free agency, kind of what they signed these guys to be last year, that being Jordan Fuller and both Nick Scott. And we saw that's how it played out. But they both came in, especially Fuller, with an opportunity to where if he played well, he could have still stuck around and signed a longer-term deal in Carolina, where I don't know if that would be the case for anybody who comes in. But you look at the three guys who I think are the most obvious options. It's both Julian Blackmon and Marcus Williams, who have, of course, visited here back in March, and then Justin Simmons, the former Bronco who played last year down in Atlanta. Now, Simmons knows the scheme. He has been, at one point in time, the best safety in the NFL over the course of multiple seasons. So he's going to be 32 this year, so he's a little older. I'm 32, so I hate to say that, but football 32, a lot older than regular 32, of course. So that would be maybe the most obvious, because if this is going to be it for Ejiro, I would think that he'd want to add somebody who knows his scheme and who's been a good player, but he wasn't necessarily that great last year in Atlanta. And of course, getting up there as he's over 30. So do you want to do that? Mike Kay, friend of the show, of the Charlotte Observer, he's noted in his writing that he believes that Julian Blackmon is a perfect fit to go next to Tre'von Moehrig in that safety room in the secondary this year. He's also under 30. I think he's 26, going to turn 27 later on this year, which fits with the whole theme of getting younger. They've done that when looking like at the corner room. When you also look at the edge group, there's a lot of young guys, second contract type of guys, even though this would technically be his third contract, as he signed like a shorter term deal in Indy to stay there with the Colts. Why not go after him, especially if you want to have somebody you can solidify the future with? But then you also like Demani Richardson, and I assume they really like Lathan Ransom. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken him in the 4th round. So maybe it makes more sense, just with those guys already being in tow, that you're going to sign an older veteran player who knows the scheme and knows the DC, even though it was only for a year, much like with Josie Jewell that 1 year in Denver, and have him come over for one season and then figure out moving down the road. I just look at Blackmon, and that would just be kind of my preference, because that could be a veteran guy who's been around, who's still young, who you compare with Moehrig for the next couple of years. And if Ejiro's a DC or not, you're going to utilize 3 safeties at points of times throughout the year and throughout games. So why not have a combination of 3 guys, and whether it be Richardson or Ransom who wins that 3rd spot, I don't care. Like, if you have a deep safety room, that's a good spot to be in, because last year we thought there was depth. Turned out to not really be the case with the injuries and just the performances not meeting expectations. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think clearly right now, as we sit here, they should be looking for a veteran safety once training camp gets going on. Maybe they wait, because we already saw it wasn't until late April when they traded for Mike Jackson, and he played and started in every single game last year. That could be the same case with one of these guys who's out there on the street. That's a veteran safety. And I would think that they probably want to wait any of these guys until training camp's officially over and during the preseason before wanting to go to a team and sign on. Because clearly if they sign on, they're going to be signing on for a starting role. But how many safeties, just looking at it right now, are going to make the roster? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Trying to project the 53-man roster. Looking at a year ago at the safety room, Carolina kept 5. Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, Jimmy Robinson, Demani Richardson. Woods is now a Tennessee Titan. Jordan Fuller is now an Atlanta Falcon. Gross. Nick Scott back here, but in a reduced role. Jimmy Robinson did not stick around. Only lasted for like a season and a half after being drafted in the 5th round a year prior. And then Demani Richardson is still here on the roster. So looking at it, guaranteed roster spots, roster bubble, practice squad options / UFL bound, guaranteed roster spot. Tre'von Moehrig, you signed to a big deal, so clearly he's not going anywhere. Demani Richardson, think he would be pretty secure. And then Lathan Ransom, who you just drafted, would be secure as well. So after that, Nick's got to have him on the roster bubble. Why? Because, well, he wasn't good for the U last year, and he also was pretty banged up, and you're asking him to play special teams. If he gets outplayed by some of the younger guys behind him, special teams wise, that is, why would you guarantee his roster spot? Now, I do think no matter what, he'll end up being on the roster, kind of like a Justin McCray situation on the offensive line a couple of years ago, where they cut him because he was an older guy and would have a guaranteed contract, and they brought him back after the week one because, again, older guy, knows the scheme, had been where James Campen before. I think that's probably how things play out with Nick Scott here. Just looking, depending on how the rest of the roster shakes out, because they could just have him on the practice squad. They could put him on the active roster later on. I would guess he's probably pretty susceptible to getting cut initially, but likely going to be on the team at some point in time for probably the majority of the season. The guys who I have as practice squad options, less UFL bound, who honestly, looking at it right now, and I'll say this too, like, I'm going to assume that they're going to add another guy. So Moehrig, Richardson, Ransom, veteran coming into place, a starting role. Those four would be guaranteed. And then you got Scott on the bubble, who would, if he makes a team, be a special teamer. If he doesn't make it, probably get signed back later, be a special teamer, and fill out that fifth spot. But if they don't, for whatever reason, bring in a veteran, and even if they do, like, I'm looking at these next three, all undrafted free agents, all rookies: Isaac Gifford from Nebraska, Jack Anderson from Minnesota, and then Tre'von Thomas from Arkansas State, as you can carve out a spot on this team, much like Richardson, not just because of how you play defensively, but on special teams. So these guys hustle, make plays special teams wise. They can beat out Nick Scott, and they can be that fifth safety. And then Scott can still come back, or they can at least be on a practice squad. So I would give all three of them a legit shot to make the team, just based off of the vested veteran situation, Nick Scott, and the fact that Scott's coming in to be a special teamer. And if you're younger and you haven't shown that you can be a liability at safety in the NFL, why not give them the opportunity? So Isaac Gifford, Jack Henderson, Tre'von Thomas, you might not be UFL bound after all. You might be able to make the practice squad, and hell, you might be on the roster bubble depending on how things play out. So look at that once we get to training camp here in a couple of weeks. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. I am not back with the mailbag just yet, but eventually I will be. So at me or DM me on Twitter, at me on Blue Sky, if you want to ask questions as we get prepared for training camp very soon. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding in. Starting on Monday, we are back to in-season mode. Yes, we still have about a week and a half before training camp gets going, but that does not matter because the NFL channel is back to 5 days a week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, starting on Monday, where we'll be looking at the entirety of the defense, talk about the state of the Panthers defense heading into 2025. All that coming up here on Monday on Locked On Panthers.